Hello, and welcome to Peter Presents Iliad. So, this is episode 7, and of course that means we're going to be going through book 7. And I'm really excited for this one, guys. I'll be honest, it's a pretty cool one that we're going to be doing tonight, and I hope you enjoyed last episode as well. I thought it was a bit of a more unique one. It was also the longest episode we've had so far. But it was also a longer book as well, so that greatly added to it. But we had such a cool topic to go into for that one. But anyway, I think that's about it for the intros this time. And once again, though, if you want to get a copy of this, there's a link in the description below. This I'm not sponsored or anything like that. I just love this book so much I made a whole series about it. So you might, if you're here, why not? Anyway, good. So let's get on with our lives. I hope you have a nice drink with you of some kind. I myself am drinking tea this evening, as I pretty much always do. And yeah, hope you're all sitting comfortably. Hope you're joining the chat and leaving a comment or a question or just getting in on it. So here we go. Iliad, Book 7. Hector rushed through the gates, and his brother Paris came with him, their hearts eager for battle. Zeus sometimes gives a tailwind to sailors at just the moment their arms and legs can push no more on their polished firwood oars. So these two appeared to the Trojans. Each took out his man, Paris killing Menestheus, son of ox-eyed Fully Medusa, and Ereutheus, whose iron mace ruled Arne. Hector's spear blade sliced Ionis's neck. Beneath his bronze helmet, his limbs went limp. Elsewhere in the crush of battle, Glaucus, son of Hippolochus, and Lycian commander, hit Iphineus on the shoulder with his spear as he clambered up behind his racing mares. He fell from his chariot, and his limbs went slack. Athena's gray eyes had all this in focus, and when she saw the Greeks being beaten, she swooped down from the peaks of Olympus to sacred Ilion. Apollo, who wanted victory for the Trojans, saw her coming as he watched from his lookout on Pergamum, and he rose up to meet her. They met by the ancient oak tree. Lord Apollo, Zeus's son, spoke first. "Daughter of great Zeus, why have you come again from Olympus? What mission are you on now? Is it to turn the tide of the battle for the Greeks, since you have no pity for the Trojans' losses? I have a better idea. Let's halt the bloodshed for today. They can fight later with Ilion on the line, since you deathless ones have your hearts set on destroying this city." And the gray-eyed goddess Athena replied, "So be it, Apollo. This is just what I had in mind in coming from Olympus to the Trojans and Greeks. But how do you intend to stop them from fighting?" Lord Apollo, son of Zeus, replied, "We could rouse the hard spirit of Hector and have him challenge one of the Greeks to fight against him, man to man. The Greeks would be indignant and rouse someone to battle Hector in single combat." Gray-eyed Athena agreed to this plan. And Helenus, Troy's seer and Priam's son, understood in his heart what these gods had agreed to. He went up to Hector and spoke to him in convincing tones. "Hector, son of Priam, Zeus' equal in wisdom, will you listen to me? I am your brother. Have all the Greeks and Trojans sit down, challenge the best of the Greeks to fight you man to man in single combat. It is not your fate to meet your end now. Thus I have heard from the gods eternal." Thus Helenus and Hector was persuaded. He went out in front along the Trojan ranks, holding a spear broadside, and they all sat down. Agamemnon had his Greeks sit down, and Athena and silver-bowed Apollo sat like vultures in Zeus's tall oak, enjoying the warriors, who sat rank on rank, bristling with shields, helmets, and spears. As a fresh blast of the west wind ripples the sea, and the sea blackens beneath it, so sat the ranks of Trojans and Greeks across the plain. And Hector spoke to them. "Hear me out, Trojans and Achaean warriors, until I have spoken what my heart commands. Zeus on high has made our oaths nothing. Hostile to both sides, he means for us to fight until you either take the towers of Troy or are beaten down beside your seafaring ships. There are among you the best of all Greece. If any of you have the will to fight me, none other than Hector, come forward now. I declare these terms, with Zeus as my witness. If your champion cuts me down with bronze, he can strip my armor and take it back to your ships. My body, though, he will return to my home to be burned in honor by Trojans and their wives. If I kill him, if Apollo gives me the glory, I will take his armor to holy Iliad and hang it in the temple of the archer god. The corpse I will send back to your hollow ships, so you long-haired Achaeans can give it burial and heap up a tomb by the broad Hellespont, so someone in generations yet to come will see as he sails by on the darkening sea. That is the tomb of a man long dead, killed in his prime by glorious Hector. Someone will say that, and my name will not die." So he spoke, and they were all hushed and silent, ashamed to refuse and afraid to accept. Finally, Menelaus stood up. He was groaning inwardly, but spoke to them in contemptuous tones. "It seems we're good at threatening the Trojans. When it comes down to it, we're women, not men. This day will go down in infamy if no Danaan meets Hector's challenge now. May you all turn to mud, sitting here without any guts and no call to glory. I'll put on armor myself. Win or lose, it's all in the hands of the immortal gods." And with that, he put on his armor, and yes, Menelaus, your life would have flickered out then in Hector's palms, because he was far stronger. Had not the Achaean commanders run up and grabbed you, Agamemnon too, the great warlord, holding you back with his right hand, saying, "Have you lost your royal mind, Menelaus? There's no call for you to behave like this. Get hold of yourself. You don't volunteer in the spirit of rivalry to fight someone you're no match for. This is Priam's son Hector we're talking about. Everyone fears him. Even Achilles tightens up at the thought of facing him in battle, and he's far better than you. Just sit down here with your troops now. The Achaeans will come up with another champion, and even if he's a fearless glutton for combat, he'll be glad to bend his knees and rest if he ever gets out of this one alive." Agamemnon said all the right things and changed his brother's mind. Relieved, Menelaus' aides took off his armor. Then Nestor stood up and spoke. "It's a sad day for Greece, a sad day. Old Peleus the charioteer would groan, the Myrmidons' great counselor and king, who questioned me once in his house and reveled in all our heroic lineages. If he were to hear of all these men cowering before Hector, he would lift his hands to the immortal gods and pray for his soul to leave his body and sink into Hades. O fathers Zeus and Athena and Apollo, if only I were young again, as in the days the Pylians and spear-mad Arcadians gathered near the rushing Caledon and fought under Phea's walls by the streams of Iardanus. On their side Eurythelion, a man like a god, stood forth as champion, wearing the armor of King Eretheus, the mace-man, as men and satin-waisted women called him, because he fought with neither bow nor spear, but broke battalions with his iron mace. Well, Lycurgus killed him by guile, not strength, in a narrow pass where his mace of iron did him no good. Before he could react, Lycurgus skewered him with his spear. Down he went, and Lycurgus stripped from him the armor he had gotten from bronze Ares, and he wore that armor wherever he went to war. And when Lycurgus was an old man in his halls, he gave it to Eurythelion, who had been his squire. Wearing that armor, he challenged all our best. They all trembled with fear. No one dared but me. My heart pumped up for battle, although I was the youngest of them all. And so we fought, and Athena gave me the glory. That was the tallest and strongest man I've ever killed. An enormous hulk sprawled out on the ground. If I were as young now, and my strength still firm, helmeted Hector would have a fight on his hands. But now here you are, the best of the Achaeans, and not one is ready to face off with this Trojan. The old man scolded them, and 9 stood up. First up was the warlord Agamemnon, followed by Tydeus' son, Diomedes, and the 2 Ajaxes, clothed in fury. Next were Idomeneus and his companion, Meriones, who weighed in like Ares, and Eurypylus, Iamon's fine son. And up rose Thoas and brilliant Odysseus, all of them willing to do battle with Hector. Then the horseman Nectar spoke out again. Now cast lots to see who will be chosen. Whoever it is will enrich the Achaeans and enrich his own heart, if he gets out alive from the grim business of bloody combat. He spoke, and each man marked his lot, and cast it into Agamemnon's helmet. Hands lifted to the god, the troops said their prayers. Someone would say, with a glance at the sky, "Let it be Ajax, Father Zeus, or Diomedes, or the king of golden Mycenae himself." Nestor shook the helmet, and out jumped the lot of the man they all wanted. It was Ajax's. A herald took it down the line from left to right and showed it to each of the Achaean elite. They all disclaimed it until he came to Ajax, who held out his hand. The herald gave him the lot. When Ajax saw it was his, he smiled inwardly, and threw it on the ground by his foot, and said, "My friends, the lot is mine, and I'm glad of it, because I think I'm going to beat Hector. But listen, while I am putting on my battle gear, pray to Lord Zeus, the son of Cronus, silently to yourselves, so the Trojans won't hear, or pray openly, since there is no one we fear. No one can drive me off against my will by force or skill. I was born and bred in Salamis, and I know I am no fool." Thus Ajax. You could hear the Greeks saying their prayers to Lord Zeus, eyes lifted up to broad, flat sky. "Father Zeus on Ida above, grant the splendor of victory to Ajax. But if you love Hector, and care for him too, vouchsafe to both equal power and glory." While they prayed, Ajax was clapping on gleaming bronze armor, and when every inch of his skin was covered, he hustled forward like the giant god of war himself, when he enters a soul-devouring battle that men have joined but Zeus has ordained. Ajax was that big, a human barricade, a Greek wall, the gristle that was his face arranged in a smile. And with every huge stride, the long shadow of his bier sagged and quivered. The Greeks liked what they saw, but the Trojans trembled, and Hector felt his heart pounding in his chest. It was impossible for him, though, to melt back into the ranks. He had issued the challenge. Ajax kept coming, holding a shield that was like a city tower, 7 folds of oxhide, mastered with bronze, the work of Tychius, whose shop was in Hyley, the best leather worker on earth, who had made this shimmering shield from 7 tough hides and an 8th layer of bronze. Telamonian Ajax held it in front of his chest now, and put his face in Hector's as he said, "Take a good look, Hector. This is what the heroes are like in the Greek army, even when Achilles isn't here smashing skulls. He's back there with the ships now, nursing his grudge against Agamemnon. But we still have a few good men to fight you. More than a few. It's your move." Hector's helmet gathered the fading light. "Telamonian Ajax, Zeus-born, the captain, don't try to unnerve me as if I were some kid or a woman who wouldn't know one end of a spear from another. I've been in a few battles and killed a few men, and I know a few moves. I can go with this shield to the right or to the left, dodge through the charging horses, or fight hand to hand with fancy footwork. But I'm not going to try anything fancy on you. I'm going to hit you straight on, if my aim is good." The taunts were over. Hector carefully balanced his spear, and when he threw it, its long shadow swept over the earth and bored through the bronze skin of Ajax's shield and through 6 oxhide layers, but the 7th layer of leather stopped it. It was Ajax's turn now. His long-shadowed spear crashed through the round of Hector's shield and ripped into the intricate breastplate, the point shearing his shirt and nicking his ribs as Hector twisted aside from black fatality. They wrenched their spears back out and went at each other again, like lions after raw meat or wild boars in rut. Hector stabbed his spear dead center into Ajax's shield, but the bronze point crumpled on its surface, and Ajax was upon him, thrusting his spear hard through Hector's shield. The force of the blow stunned him, and the point grazed his neck, drawing dark blood. This didn't stop Hector. He gave ground and picked up a stone, gripping it in one hand, a huge black slab lying in the plain, and heaved it onto Ajax's massive shield, hitting it on the boss. The bronze rang like a gong. Ajax in turn picked up a much bigger rock, the size of a millstone, and whirling around put his enormous strength into the throw, crushing Hector's shield and buckling his knees. He lay curled on his back under his shield, but Apollo quickly picked him up on his feet again, and they would have gone at each other with swords had not the heralds, Zeus's messengers and men's, come forward from both sides. Talthybius and Idaeus, prudent men both. They held their staffs between the two combatants, and Idaeus made this formal pronouncement: "Fight no more, dear sons, nor battle more. Zeus beyond the cloud loves you both, and you are both spearmen as we all know. Now it is night, and it is good to yield to night." Telamonian Ajax said in response, "Have Hector speak these words, Idaeus. He was the one who challenged our best to fight. It's his call. I'll go along with what he says." And great Hector, helmeted in gold, replied, Ajax, since a god has given you size and strength, and wisdom too, and you are the best of the Achaeans with a spear, let us call a truce to our hostilities for today. Another time we will fight again, until Zeus grants one of us the victory. Now it is night, and it is good to yield tonight. You to make glad the Greeks beside your ships, and especially the kinfolk and friends you have. Myself to make glad throughout Priam's city the Trojans and their wives, in long trailing robes, who will for my sake throng Ilion's shrines. But now we should exchange glorious gifts, so that the Greeks and Trojans will say of us, they fought each other in soul-devouring strife, but agreed to part in the spirit of friendship. And he gave him his silver-studded sword, along with its scabbard and tooled belt. Ajax gave him his own belt, bright with scarlet. Then they parted. Ajax went to the Greeks, Hector to the Trojans, who were glad to see him coming back to join them, having escaped with his life from the grim hands of Ajax. They led him back to the city, scarcely believing he was really safe. On their side, the Greeks led Ajax to Agamemnon, glad he had won. When they were in Agamemnon's quarters, the warlord sacrificed an ox for them, a bull of 5 years, to almighty Cronion. They flayed and dressed it, jointed the limbs, and sliced them skillfully, skewered the pieces, roasted them carefully, and drew them off the spits. When they were done and the feast was ready, feast they did, and no one lacked an equal share. The long chine was given in honor to Ajax by the commander-in-chief, Lord Agamemnon. When they had enough of food and drink, the first to spin out his plan was Nestor, whose advice had always seemed best before. He was full of goodwill in the speech he made. Son of Atreus, and Greek leaders all, many of our flowing-haired boys are dead, their blood spilled by Ares near the Scamander, their souls bound for Hades, and so there is need for the army to pause from combat, and at dawn collect the corpses and wheel them back here, by ox and mule cart. We will burn them near the ships, so that when we return to our land we may bear their bones home to their children. Near the pyre we will heap a common barrow out into the plain, and up against it we will build a high wall, working fast, a defense for our ships and for ourselves, and set it in close-fitting gates, so there will be a way to drive chariots through. Just outside the wall we will dig a deep trench, as a hazard for enemy troops and horses, should the proud Trojans ever press us hard. Thus Nestor and all the kings assented. Meanwhile, on the Acropolis of Troy, an unruly assembly mobbed Priam's doors. Wise Antenor led off with this speech, "Hear me, Trojans and Dardanian allies, that I might speak my heart. All right, then. Let us give Helen of Argos to Atreus' sons, her and her possessions for them to take away. We are fighting in false faith, and can have no profit from it. This is our only hope." He had his say, and sat down. Then up stood rich-haired Helen's husband, godlike Paris, who answered him with these winged words. "I don't like what you are saying, Antenor. You know how to speak better than this, but if you really mean what you are saying, then the gods must have destroyed your wits. This is what I have to say, Trojans, and I'll say it straight out. I won't give her back. But the treasure I brought with her from Argos I will give back, and add some of my own." He had his say, and sat down. Then uprose Dardanian Priam, peer of the gods in council, full of good will in the speech that he made. "Hear me, Trojans and Dardanian allies, that I might speak my heart. For the present, take your dinner throughout the city as usual, and each man of you be alert and on watch. At dawn, Idaeus will go to the Greek ships to tell Atreus' sons, Menelaus and Agamemnon, the word of Alexander, who is the cause of this war, and to propose an armistice to burn the dead. Later we will fight again until the deity decides between us and bestows the victory." He spoke, they listened, and they did as he said. The army took their supper by platoons, and at dawn Idaeus went down to the ships and found the Greek warlords assembled beside the stern of Agamemnon's vessel. The wind from the Aegean carried his voice. "Son of Atreus, and Achaean princes all, Priam and the other lords of Troy bid me tell you, and may it be sweet to your ears, the word of Alexander, the cause of our strife. All of the treasure he brought back to Troy in his ship's hold, would he had died beforehand, he will give back, and add some of his own. But the former wife of renowned Menelaus he will not give back, though the Trojans bid him, as they bid me also. Propose, if you are willing, an armistice until we can burn the dead. Later we will fight again until the deity decides between us and bestows the victory." He spoke, and they were all hushed in silence, until Diomedes' martial voice boomed out, "Accept nothing from Alexander, not even Helen. Even a fool can see the noose is tightening around the Trojans." The Greeks cheered when they heard this, delighted with Diomedes' blunt reply, and Lord Agamemnon addressed Idaeus. "Idaeus, you yourself hear the Greeks answer, and it is my pleasure too. As for burning the corpses, I do not begrudge it at all. One does not stint the dead or deny to them the swift consolation of fire. May Zeus, Hera's thundering consort, witness our oaths." And he lifted up his staff to the gods. Idaeus went back to sacred Iliad, where Trojans and Dardanians sat in assembly, awaiting his return. He stood in their midst and delivered his message, and they set to work to bring in the dead and gather wood. Likewise, the Greeks, hurrying from their ships, brought in their dead and gathered wood. The sun's light lay new on the fields as it rose from deep, soft waters of ocean and climbed the sky. The armies met on the plain. It was difficult to recognize each of the dead, but they washed the clotted blood with water, and, shedding hot tears, lifted them onto carts. Great Priam would not allow his people to wail aloud, so in silence they heaped the corpses on the pyre, grieving at heart. And when they had burned them, they returned to sacred Iliad. And the Greeks too heaped the corpses on their pyre, grief in their hearts, and having burned them, returned to the ships. It was twilight before the following dawn, when chosen Greek troops gathered at the pyre. Working fast, they heaped around it a common barrow, extending out on the plain, and up against it they built a high wall to protect their camp, complete with tight gates, so there would be a way to drive chariots through. Just outside the wall they dug a trench, deep and wide, and in it planted stakes. As the Greeks toiled, their hair flowing around their shoulders and bronze chests, the gods, seated around lightning Zeus, marveled at their work. Poseidon, lord of the islands, was first to speak. "Father Zeus, is there now any mortal in all the wide world who will tell the gods what he intends? Do you see that the Greeks have built a wall and trench around their ships without offering us bulls by the hundred? Fame of this will reach as far as dawn spreads light, and men will forget the wall that Apollo and I built with toil for the hero Laomedon. This provoked a troubled, gloomy response. "What a thing for you to say, you, the Temblor. Some lesser god might fear this ploy, but not you, whose fame will reach as far as dawn spreads light. Choose your time, when the Greeks have left with their ships for home. Smash the wall to bits and sweep it out to sea, and cover the great beach again with sand, so that the Achaeans' wall becomes a dwindling thought." As they spoke to each other in this way, the sun went down, and the Greeks' work was done. They slaughtered oxen and took their supper outside their huts. Wine ships from Lemnos had just sailed in, sent by Jason's son, Eueneus, the son of Hypsipyle, bore to the great adventurer. Eueneus had shipped for the sons of Atreus, Agamemnon and Menelaus, a special consignment, 1,000 liters of sweet red. The other Greeks went on board to barter for their wine, some with bronze, others with iron hides, cattle, or slaves. They made a rich feast. All night long, the Greeks feasted, and the Trojans feasted with their allies throughout the city. And all night long Zeus the counselor devised evil for them, thundering terribly. Pale fear seized them, and no man dared drink before spilling wine to Cronos' mighty son. Sleep was welcome when it finally came. And that, believe it or not, is the end of Book 7. Now, I have a confession to make. As this doesn't happen a lot, so this might sound really strange to all of you, but I made a mistake, which was that I thought that the wall was already there. And that's incorrect, as we see in this, is that the Greeks build the wall in this book. So when I showed you that cool thing that I spent all this time, setting up these fences and all that with the soldiers and the ships, I was wrong. My bad. But there's something that we kind of learned that's even cooler about the wall now, which is that the base of the wall is filled with the bodies of dead Greeks. And then they put the stakes in that. And then, of course, they have gates that they can open and stuff. And there's a trench with spikes in it, which is, pretty metal. But we get to hear from Poseidon this time. Well, hang on, let me go in. Well, yeah. So we get to hear from Poseidon, who's jealous because he... Oh, whoopsie. It's live. We get to hear from Poseidon this time, which is interesting because he's one of the big three of the gods, because Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon are brothers, and Hera is their sister, and so they and a couple other ones are like the original Olympians, who were the sons and daughters of Cronos. So a little thing about that story, just a short tangent. Cronos was their dad, and his wife would bear him children. But you see, Cronos killed his father. There's a lot of father killing in Greek mythology, even though their overarching matriarch Gaia, Mother Earth, is still alive. But Cronos anyway was like, I don't want my sons to kill me. Or any of my children to kill me. And so what he ended up doing was he would eat his kids, but he would swallow them whole. But his wife ended up getting jealous, or not jealous, what the heck am I saying? Upset, like a reasonable person, that her husband was killing them. And so she swaddled a stone instead of her baby. And so Cronos ate that, and she let Zeus be raised more. So his other brothers and sisters were eaten, which meant that he was technically alive longer in the world than they were. So then when he poisoned his father, Cronos, and Cronos vomited up his children that he had swallowed whole, technically that made Zeus the eldest even though they were like eaten first, but he was like out and about longer, so they always call him father, even if it's like his brother or whatever. And then they fought the Titans for 10 years, and that's how we got into the situation that we have today in Iliad, with the Olympians being in charge of everybody. So I'll go more into that backstory some other time. I think I'd like to bring that up a little bit. But there's actually, let's back up here so that kind of go in order. I think one of the coolest highlight from this chapter is that Ajax and Hector have a fight. And what we see is that both of them are equally matched. Okay, they fight until everyone tells them to stop. And they're like, look, you guys aren't even close to being done here, and neither of us wants either of you to die, but we get the sense that they're equals in battle. And that's pretty cool. That says a lot about Hector and Ajax. Ajax is this giant guy. By the way, a shield worked this time. Woohoo! Finally, only took the best shield in the world to stop a spear. But yeah, so finally one of the shields worked. That's good. But Ajax is this giant of a man with a huge tower shield with so many layers of leather and bronze on it. And even then, Hector is having a hard time defeating him. Now, what do we know about Ajax, especially, aside from the fact that he's tall and all that? And he even mentions it. He isn't the greatest fighter on the Greek side, but Hector is the greatest fighter on the Trojan side. In fact, 9 guys stand up to fight Hector. 9 guys who might be able to defeat Hector, or at least his equal. Like Odysseus, he'd probably find a way to do it. Diomedes, we've just seen him killing tons of people, so he'd probably, it might not be beyond it would be the hardest fight of his life, but he could possibly win. Hector is the best that Troy has. And what do we know about the Greeks? They've got Achilles. And Achilles is way better than all of them. Now, we haven't heard from Achilles, I think, since like book 1 or something. So the Trojans are really trying to take advantage of the fact that he's not around anymore. And but it's like there's this time bomb over in the Greek camp. They're like, I just really hope, please, like, Achilles, stay mad, don't come out and fight. But the Greeks are still trying to make stuff happen, and they're actually starting to win. And one of the crazy things about all that is when Hector says, like, all right, one of you fight me. The first one to say, I'll fight you, is Menelaus. Now, I know that this show takes place over several days and stuff, so you might have lost a little track of time, but this is like the same day that Paris was, fought Menelaus and then ran away. And then they had that whole conversation and came back. So Menelaus was about to fight a second time in single combat. But what happens differently this time? Everybody stops him. Okay? So at first, they're totally fine with him fighting Paris, because Menelaus is like, I'm going to kill Paris. And everyone's like, he's gonna kill Paris. And even the Trojans are like, oh, thank goodness, Paris is gonna finally die. And then Menelaus finally says, you know what? Yeah, okay, I'll fight Hector. And everyone's like, are you crazy? You can't do that. You're gonna die. You can't fight Hector. So everybody knows what's going on here. But, yeah, so the Greeks have the better heroes. And there's all this stuff. Even the one seer says to Hector, it's not your time yet. There's this kind of secret prophecy, though, that the Trojans have that keeps being alluded to, about Hector's end. But Hector says some really cool stuff when he says, like, I'm going to kill the guy, I'm going to bury him here, and he's going to be known forever, famously, by the fact that I killed him. That's a crazy power move. It's like the most important thing this guy ever did was get killed by Hector. That's what would have happened. I mean, guy's got away with words. Pretty crazy. Now, something really interesting, though, is that the terms that Hector puts out for the fight are, whoever wins, give the body back. If I win, I'll give the body back. If you guys win, you're going to give me back to Ilion so that we can have a funeral. All right? That was very important to these people at the time, is what you do with a dead body. And you can see in this that there's all this weight to it later when they're picking up the bodies. Now, normally, I guess, in a lot of war movies or stories and stuff like that, you might have like a scene where someone's picking up a dead body for a couple seconds, but it's not all that common. And once again, Homer has like this glorious, cool, like, WWE. I don't think it's actually called that anymore because the panda people took it. But these two godlike heroes fighting each other. It's glorious. It's awesome. And they're like, yeah, Ajax is so cool and he's tall, he's brilliant, and Hector has great armor. And then they get on to picking up the dead bodies. They're like, everybody stops fighting and they're weeping hot tears. And they're like, a lot of our boys are dead. And here's what we're going to do with the bodies. And it's just this dark scene. And even the Trojans are fed up. The one guy says, give Helen back, guys. Just look, I'm sure she's hot. Just give him back to the freaking Achaeans. And Paris, of course, is like, I won't. And I hate that guy forever. But the last thing we're kind of left with here is that and in fact, even, hang on real quick, the Greeks, I'm looking at my notes, the Greeks even pray for Hector. They say, like, but if you love Hector and care for him too, vouchsafe to both equal power and glory. That's a lot of respect. That's like, loving your enemies level of praying for them. Like, they respect the living daylights out of him. It's kind of like they don't hold this war against Hector. And they know that, like, and Hector's trying to end the war, too. Like, he puts his brother Paris out there. It's like, hey, if you kill him, the war is over. Hey, if we win, the war is over. And then he's like, you know what? I'm going out on the front line. Fight me. Whoever wins, that's it. So I think the Greeks at this point kind of like Hector. He's a really popular, honorable guy, even though the Trojans just like betrayed them with Paris, flying off with Aphrodite after that single combat. Hector stops the fighting again. Could you step out in the middle of a battlefield and make everybody stop? Not without a megaphone, I don't think, and a lot of charisma, natural 20 on that one, but everybody has a really positive opinion of Hector, and Helen wants to sleep with him, and I mean, who wouldn't, right? I mean, honestly, that guy. But when they stop fighting, he and Ajax and Hector stop fighting, and they're friends. They fight a bit, and he says, so the Greeks and Trojans will say of us, they fought each other in soul-devouring strife, but agreed to part in the spirit of friendship. Why are these guys fighting? Why are these guys fighting? They like each other. They're friends. It's like, man, you're tough. Well, let's get a drink after this war is over. Yeah, I hope you kill my brother next time. So, and then they have the exchanging of gifts, which happens, which we hear about from, which happens with Diomedes and Glaucus, and happened with their ancestors. So there's this respect for what you do with dead bodies. You let the other team honor their dead. You let them pick them up, So there's a weird, I don't know if I'd call it civility to war. I guess that would be the right word, but I think I might almost say ritual to it. There's, you fight at certain times. There's rules. There's I want to be treated this way, so I'm going to treat you that way. And there's just kind of cultural rules to war, I guess, at that point. We also got a nice little reference to hanging up armor in Apollo's temple, which we talked about before, about how people would actually sign the armor, so they'd go, oh yeah, I killed this fantastic person, ain't I great? But then at the end we see Poseidon, who's a big deal of a god, he's rules the oceans, is getting jealous of this wall the Greeks are building. He's like, well, they didn't make sacrifice when they were doing it. I want to break up that wall. It's gonna look way better than the wall I helped someone else make. And Zeus is like, dude, you're famous. Shut up. You can destroy the wall after the Greeks leave, but leave them alone for now. I'm gonna plan something bad for them. So that's kind of what happens in the in that part of the story. So yeah, but we get a cool showdown between two heroes, and they're equal, which is cool. But the Greeks have another guy. Who, by the way, let's talk about that real quick. Where the heck is Achilles? I don't just mean like I know where he is. He's over there. Where is he in this book, right? Isn't he the main character? Like, Achilles, he's the one everybody knows about. But so far, who do we know the most about really in this story? Who do we know the most in this story so far? Who has the most most scenes, perhaps, or the scenes with the most emotional appeal to them? Whose relationship, like, who has the most interesting relationships with all the other characters? Whose wife do we know? All right, whose son do we know? Who do we know the most about in this story? You know who it is? You know exactly who it is. It's frigging Hector. Everybody loves Hector, and at this point, he's the guy that everybody is rooting for. He's the one we know the most about. We have a scene with him and his wife. So, what's the deal? Like, are we gonna have a movie that's like, I don't know. I'm trying to find an example at this point. I mean, well, okay, I just thought of a great example. So, the United States. Let's take another example from history that we can perhaps relate to more. The United States, no secret, fought with the native indigenous peoples of this continent for a long time. And I'm not going to go into a huge thing on the history of film and all that because I would love to, but but it's not unusual for a film today to have the natives, the Indians, be the good guys, and the cavalry to be the bad guys. Now, that was not always the case in movies. For a long time, the Indians were the bad guys, particularly when the audience was raised by the generation of people who did that. And grandparents. It's like, but when the first Westerns were coming out, there were people alive who had seen what was going on in those movies, which is a crazy thing to think about now, because we think of them as like way, way past history, but it wasn't. And now, a lot of Hollywood's angle is making the natives to be very strongly the good guys. It's almost... I'm not sure you can really get away too much with having the natives be the bad guys in a Western anymore. It's like without... The closest thing I guess we'd have is the remake of The Magnificent Seven, which has one bad native in it, and there's also a good one, and that's kind of a cool movie. But anyway, so... I don't know. I think, is there like a shame from Greece about what happened here? I'm really kind of baffled, and I'm not like... I've been freaking out about this for years, but yeah. All right, so I'm going to go into the chat now. Hopefully y'all are talking. I can't even see if you're commenting while I'm doing this because I'd be way too distracted. So let's see. Oh, okay. Well, it looks like no one tuned in this time, but you know what? That's okay. I'm going to get y'all next week, and this Monday, actually, 7:30 Eastern Daylight Time, and I hope you check out this show. So with that, I guess we're going to end our thing that we're doing here, and I hope that you have a wonderful night. And if you have joined me for this, I really hope you liked it, and I hope that I'll see you again soon. And if you are not watching this live, hey, thanks a lot for making this far. I hope that I see you in episode 8. With that, have a great night, everybody.